So my internet dropped out there for a second, so I'm back. This is continuation of my quitting cannabis, tobacco and Kavixel. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Quit cannabis is working, so yeah, this is me quitting cannabis and tobacco by repetition. Quit cannabis, tobacco, Kavixel. 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 Practice 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 cannabis, tobacco, Kavixel. Spend energy quitting 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 cannabis, tobacco, Kavixel. Quitting cannabis, tobacco, Kavixel. Spend energy quitting cannabis. Spend energy quitting cannabis, tobacco, Kavixel. 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 Spend energy quitting cannabis, tobacco, clipixel. 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 Practice cannabis, tobacco, clipixel. Work 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 cannabis, tobacco, clipixel. 112 and 115. Yeah, that's okay. I just made 50k in 5 hours. 10k an hour running 2 accounts at $1.50 a shrouded cloth. I bought 100k shrouded cloth at $1.50 each. 1 gold 50 each. And just made 50k. Took 5 hours though, running 2 accounts. If you had 1 account, it would take you 10 hours. You burn about 10k cloth an hour. And that's only making 5k per account, 5k per hour per account. So 10k an hour running 2 accounts. You can do much better with farming, or I've done way better selling pets. You can make way more money selling pets for the time spent, but this is easy. It's pretty low maintenance, like you don't have to, you can AFK for 5 minutes, you know, you can set it to run, then AFK for 5 minutes. So got 119 and 112, so that's 131. And it's 231, and I started with 180. So yeah, that's 50k. 50k, man. I just made 50k. Let's go see if there's any cheap cloth on those.
Your blades never dull. Have anything ancient to trade? Needs to be at least 2
Quit
centuries.
cannabis tobacco. Quit 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 cannabis tobacco. Bye now. Quit cannabis tobacco. Quit cannabis tobacco. Quit cannabis tobacco. Quit cannabis tobacco clipixel. 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 Quit cannabis, tobacco, tobacco. 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 Quit cannabis, tobacco, tobacco.
What can I help
Cannabis,
you?
tobacco, tobacco. Two. So we've got 8. Quit cannabis, tobacco, tobacco. 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 Quit cannabis, tobacco, tobacco.
Strength.
Quit cannabis, tobacco, tobacco. 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 Work cannabis, tobacco, tobacco. Work cannabis, tobacco, tobacco.
Hey, how you doing?
Work cannabis, tobacco, tobacco. Work cannabis, tobacco, tobacco. Work cannabis, tobacco, tobacco. Work cannabis, tobacco,
Keep your ear
tobacco.
to the ground.
Work cannabis, tobacco, tobacco. 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 Work
Speak,
cannabis,
friend.
tobacco, tobacco. Work cannabis, 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 tobacco, tobacco.
Speak, friend.
Work cannabis, tobacco, tobacco. 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 Work cannabis, tobacco,
Blades
tobacco.
never dull.
Work cannabis, tobacco, tobacco. Work cannabis, tobacco, tobacco. Work cannabis, tobacco, tobacco. Work cannabis, tobacco, tobacco. Work cannabis, tobacco, tobacco.
Mukhtar.
Work cannabis, tobacco, tobacco. Work 7.2, 8.5. Work cannabis, tobacco, tobacco. 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 Work cannabis, tobacco, clipexal. Speed energy, 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 cannabis, tobacco, clipexal. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Speed energy, cannabis and cannabis, tobacco, clipexal. Speed energy, 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 cannabis, tobacco, clipexal. Work, 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 cannabis, tobacco, clipexal. Speed energy, 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 cannabis, tobacco, clipexal. Can you make a clap noise for me? Honorable shit up. Cannabis, tobacco, clipexal. Cannabis, tobacco, clipexal. Cannabis, tobacco, clipexal. Cannabis, tobacco, clipexal. Maybe it helps just to name them, not have like any action words or anything, and just see what my mind dredges up. Cannabis, tobacco, clipexal. 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 Cannabis, tobacco, clipexal.
That bag's full.
Cannabis, tobacco, clipexal. 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 Cannabis, tobacco. Alright, anyway, I'm gonna go next door to my neighbour and borrow a cigarette. It's been an hour. I'll check my timer. I set a timer before I've gone without. Gone without a cigarette for an hour and a half. So I'm thinking I can wean myself off if I just go do lots of time without cigarettes and just deal with the cravings, just get familiar with the cravings. An hour and a half's pretty good. Most people can't go 10 minutes or 20 minutes without a cigarette, you know, so an hour and a half's pretty good. So I'll get a cigarette and then I'll start the timer again. So I'll be back in a couple minutes. Hang on. So I got 2 smokes. So I did an hour and a half without any smokes. And we'll have a smoke. And then we'll do another hour and a half. Or longer. Man, my addictions have ruined my health. In my mind. I'm 43 now. I'm old enough. I need to grow up, you know. I need to get physically right. I watched this video of this this guy. He was living in Australia and he lived in the outback and he was like 43 kg and a nutcase and like a hermit, you know, like a caveman or something, or a hermit. And he decided to get himself right at about 50 or something, or 60 or something, or some age, 40 maybe. And he got into a course and he learned how to read and write, and he ended up getting a PhD in the end. Took him about 8 years. but he got a PhD from being a hermit, you know, and being really violent, and yeah, he'd beat people up and stuff. So he ended up sorting himself out. So that's what I want to do. My mind's too damaged to learn. I can learn basic stuff. I can learn some stuff, but it's really hard. It's really hard to learn.
Inventory is full.
Can you make it like that? No. Quit cannabis, tobacco, Calypso. Quit cannabis, tobacco, Calypso. Got to go score a foil soon. So cannabis. That's where I'm off to. I'm off to go get a foil. Go get some cannabis. My only cannabis allowance for the day. 1 gram. I'll get 1 gram of cannabis. Need to go to the toilet. I'm back in a sec. Just gotta go to the toilet. So Matt, this has been about an hour. I did a 20-minute video and then my internet cut out for a couple of minutes. And then, so I got back on pretty quick though. But yeah, walk up cut out and streaming cut out. So it must have been the internet. gotta go soon. I'll stop the stream. I'll come back, have a session, and then I'll start up the stream again. And I'll do some more practice. That would have been a good 40 minutes of repetition. I wonder what it's achieved. Has it achieved anything, you know? I've spent some time, instead of just rambling on about random stuff, I've spent energy on a focused goal. I think focus is the key. You got to focus. You can't just say, oh well, I'm going to quit cannabis and tobacco and then just quit them. Some people can, but you know, it takes a while. That decision didn't come overnight. They probably were working in the background on that decision, you know, thinking it over in the background, not even aware that they were thinking of it. Quit cannabis, tobacco, Clipixel. 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 So I'll try and save the cigarette I've got until after the sesh, and I'll have a coffee. I'm going to buy a coffee. I've got a free coffee actually. You buy 5 coffees, you get 1 free, so I've got a free coffee that I'm going to get. That's 10 to 5, so it's an hour stream. That was my alarm. So I'll stream for another 5 minutes, and then I'll take off and get my 1 gram of cannabis. I do feel better, like I could actually, like I've made some progress or something, you know. And I had a couple of thoughts about cannabis and tobacco. I was trying to think at the same time, you know, as repetition, and trying to deal with the mind issues that you face with cannabis and tobacco and Clipixel. So yeah. Need money, guys. And if I get off cannabis, tobacco, Clipixel, I'll have so much money. 200 a week, spare, just to spend, just to blow. 200 a week just to blow. So I've got to keep doing YouTube videos. I think it's good. I think it's a good thing. Spending focused energy, focused effort and time. Spending time. Not just trying to deal with it without preparing, and without, you know, working. Not without the work. You got to do the work first, and then you can quit. Do the work. So I've got to do the work. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Still going. So it's 4:52. Can you make a clap noise for me? La-di-da, shit-a-bird, honorable, honorable, shit-a-bird, honorable, shit-a-bird. But you gotta put what, what's the word for what? What's the word for what? I recommend the Nightcore version of Passenger 57, Let It Go. Nightcore, Passenger 57, Let It Go. And you let it go. Whoa, whoa. Nightcore version. And also the original. The original's pretty good too. 3 billion views, see that's pretty good. And you let it go. Whoa, whoa. Can you make it clap noise?
Inventory is full.
Let it go. Whoa, whoa. Everything and 93. There you go. Oh. I love Jesus. I love God. But they're probably done with this. Okay guys, I'll end the stream and I'll be back in probably an hour or so. And I'll burn some more cloth and I'll do some more repetitions. Can you make it that noise? You can do. Okay, goodbye YouTube. You gotta go.